Welcome back, everybody, and also to anybody who's newly joined us for this portion of the conference. We now come to our third and final session. In this, we will look at the new technologies available in ATM and address how this can help us to modernize this domain. Remember that you can submit questions through Slido, either on any device that you choose, using slido.com or in the streaming window. The hashtag is ASC 2021. Our moderator for this panel is David Batchelor, who is in charge of external affairs and communication at the SESAR joint undertaking. SESAR JU is leading and coordinating the research and innovation activities aimed at delivering the digital transformation of ATM in Europe. David recently supported the Commission's Wise Persons Group in preparing its report on the future of a single European sky, so he's well placed to lead our session. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Janet, and welcome everybody to this, which is the third and final panel session of this conference. I hope you've all had a very good lunch, but I hope you're also still hungry for what I think was going to be a very interesting panel discussion. I'd first of all like to thank EASA and especially Patrick Key for inviting me and the SESAR joint undertaking to participate in this important conference and to moderate this session. From the SESAR joint undertaking perspective, we're at a very interesting moment as we're on the brink of the creation of the new SESAR 3 joint undertaking, which is expected to be established by the end of this year, as was already mentioned earlier today by Mr. Hololai. And echoing what Janet's just said, the SESAR 3 joint undertaking will have the task of conducting the research, development and demonstration activities to deliver the plans foreseen in the European ATM Master Plan, which is Europe's commonly agreed roadmap for ATM modernization and which sets the vision of establishing a digital European sky by 2040. We've already heard today from a number of speakers on the important role that technology and innovation has to play in the future of air traffic management. And there's clearly a lot of hope and indeed expectation that technology can deliver a lot for the future of our network. So I'm sure we have a lot of issues to discuss. We'll be discussing questions like what does the digital transformation of ATM really mean? What are the key enablers? What can technology do to support or promote the scalability and resilience of the air traffic management system? How can we accelerate the uptake of new technologies in ATM? And what about the human dimension, which has been discussed, touched on earlier today? What does technology mean for the role of the human, for example? So with me here today, I have a great panel of speakers who represent some of the key stakeholders in the ATM value chain. I'll just quickly introduce them. To my right, Iacopo Prissinotti, who is the Director of Network Management at EUROCONTROL. On my immediate left, Ramon Tarrech, who is Director of ATM from INDRA and is also Chair of the ATM Committee at ASD, which represents all of the manufacturers. To my far right, we have Peter Kearney, the CEO of the Irish Aviation Authority. And on my far left, representing a member state, and in a very important member state, the Slovenian presidency, Srečko Janša, who is Director General from the Ministry of Infrastructure of Slovenia. As with earlier panels, you have the opportunity to ask your own questions via the Slido tool. So I do encourage you to pose your questions, and I'll do my best to make sure we have time before the end of the session to address some of the questions which are coming up from the audience. So I'm going to kick off with a general question to the whole panel, and I'll direct it to you first, Iacopo. I've mentioned already the digital European sky, and we've heard already today a number of references to digitalization. But what exactly are we talking about with these terms? What is the transformation that new technology and innovation can bring to the ATM domain?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, great congratulations to EASA for such an initiative. Well, first of all, I would like to say that what has been said by the colleagues in the previous sessions, there must be a change. I would also add the fact that we need to be time-driven in doing this change. I think ATM technology in time has been as conservative as ATM has been, And so we need a dramatic shift. And I think I will introduce a word which is often used as a buzzword, which is digital transformation. Digital transformation is not a buzzword. It's not simply using computer. It's not simply digitizing things. It's about a dramatic shift towards a new way of operating, a new way of moving. A lot of the industries which have taken up this journey outside our world have either been successful or have failed for one very simple reason, that the digital transformation is not only about technology. It's primarily about change management. It's about people change. And that's where we need to start from. We have a fundamental action to make, is to introduce this cultural change in aviation and enter into this journey, which has already started, by the way, in a pragmatic and effective way. The positive element that I would like to introduce is today we have a great number of excellent experts. We have a new leadership in aviation, which I think is ready and fit for purpose. And I think we need to add an essential element, which is this enhanced cooperation that we in EUROCONTROL are bringing in. Why? Because natively, the digital transformation will bring the cloud-based solutions, will bring a need for cybersecurity. There's been a lot of talk about cybersecurity. We'll have the need to have what we call the single truth on our data, which is absolutely essential, especially for safety of life services. All this is natively bringing the needs to more integration and to break the barriers of this fragmentation. So digital transformation will automatically mean for our sector to enter into the new world of full integration in ourselves. And what is EUROCONTROL and what is the network manager doing in this respect? Well, on our side, we have a dual role. On one side, inside our house, we have launched the digital transformation journey by from the technological point of view, launching a vast 300 million system modernization strategy, where we're going to have, in time-driven way, in 3 years' time, a brand new open architecture, digitally transformed system. And of course, we have launched an internal digital transformation with our people by doing development plans and creating the new environment to support this. On the other side, as a second action, of course, we have our role in the network. And we have started to install some of the fundamentals to be successful. First and foremost, what I call the effective decision making. We are one network organized in a distributed model. And in this distributed model, there's a lot of actors, military, NSPs, airlines, airports. And all these actors need to work as one. So with the advanced methodologies that we're putting in place through this Network Director of Operations, Network Director of Technology, we're bringing the right accountable people together to decide. In addition, I would also like to say that the approach that is starting to happen because of a number of external factors is becoming really positive. And we're going to leverage on creating more and more robustness in this common decision making, and also bringing in all the pieces of the value chain. It's been too much time where we had R&D on one side, technology deployment on one side, operations on the other side. We need to bring the value chain together and act as one. And this is another part of what we're working there. In addition to all this, we started to do and act. So together with the partners and led by the industry, because I think one thing that EUROCONTROL is strongly advocating is making sure that we support the network, that we support the industry decision making, because that's our role. And that's where we're starting to build. We already have some good common services, and we're building these new infrastructural common services for the digital transformation. Just to give some examples, we have, for instance, as you know, the IP network, PANS, it's already a common service. The aeronautical database, EAD, which will evolve dramatically in the nearest future, is already a common service. We are now working, we just signed an agreement to work together with the industry in the new data link solutions, which are fundamental and essential for the network. Another part is cybersecurity. We are about also to engage on a common cybersecurity capability. This says it all. It says that the journey we have started is going in the right direction. The only thing we need to do now is to acknowledge that there's no way back, to acknowledge that we need to boost it and to be time-driven, because we have also some time to catch up, to quickly enter into this new environment. And of course, the output will be significant. There will be, of course, much better performance in terms of the trajectory management, so environmental impact, and of course, much more cost effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Iacopo. So you were stressing there not just the technology side, but the cultural and the change management aspects, which is interesting. If I turn to you, Ramon, obviously from the manufacturer's side, I imagine you're going to talk more about the technology aspects. So I'm interested in your reactions to what Iacopo said. But the basic question is what are the transformations that technology can bring?
I think that it's fully recognized already by the morning that the transformation is absolutely needed in the industry. There is the commitment from the operational industry. There is the support of the European institutions in terms of further innovation with SESAR 3. And there is also the recognition that I will bring back when we were starting SESAR a few years ago, which is it cannot be that this industry depends on pilot voice communications with the aircraft. We need to go further. I think that after all these years, we have excellent R&D. There has been a lot of change in the common technologies domain in terms of cloud. COVID is shown us that it's not stupid to talk about virtual control centers, that this can happen. So now, I think that we will see at least 3 changes in the technology deployment in the next years, which is, of course, the digitalization aspects of cloud, included in this leadership that we see in many NSPs, in many service providers. I think that, the regulation here and there, what is important is the people that want to do it. The technology is available. And we will see more virtual towers. We will see digital towers. We will see more agility in how these systems can be deployed. If we set up the right support early on from EASA in the R&D phases to close this gap between the R&D and the value of technology into operations in the room with the people at the center. And I think that we're going to be seeing more service-oriented architectures that will enable ATM to evolve. I think that at the end, all this integration of data will change a little bit the way we work. And this is going to happen in the domain of higher levels of automation. The other domain that I think it's going to be coming into ATM in terms of technology, and we are working on it, is UTM. UTM, the integration of UTM into ATM, and learning from these more distributed ways of procuring services, and how this is going to be integrated. This will make an evolution into a more collaborative arrangement between different suppliers. It's going to be very interesting, and it's going to happen. And last and not least, I think the other domain where we're going to see evolution and for the real will be in the CNS satellite domain with the use space. I think this will provide benefits for improving the oceanic areas for sure, but also in continental. I think that the CNS rationalization, which will not only support better services, but also more efficient services, which is what we've heard this morning that everybody is asking for, and that we should do. And also a word of expectation that now is the time to act, because if you look into the investments that other FAA and other whatever, I don't care, and the level of technology investments that other people are doing, if we want to keep, I know that Europe, but as you can see it when you go abroad, the technology that the European ATM has is probably in the best of the world. So if we want to keep this leadership, we need to really focus on deploying what we have now.
Thanks, Ramon. So, I mean, there's a lot of different elements in there in terms of the technology transformation. Peter, I'm looking at you as an NSP. What's your perspective? Are you attracted by everything Ramon's promising to deliver to you? How do you see the opportunities from transformation?
Well, Ramon and myself are best friends at this point, so I believe everything he's telling me. We see probably 5 or 6 key transformations, I think, David. And the first one would be the adoption of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and digital solutions. And we'll use those to enhance ATCO productivity. Predominantly, we would see that by providing more space within their working memory. So that'll allow them better decisions, faster and more accurate solutions. We would see a lot of detail from artificial intelligence, particularly in enhancing conflict detection and resolution, and the sharing of data from the cockpit to the ATM system. Another way to increase ATCO productivity, of course, is reduce the number of interactions that the controller has to make with the system. And that's again, an area of key focus that we have. An interesting area we're looking at with Thales on this one, which is digital instructors. So we'll use machine learning to understand traffic patterns, how weather impacts on the operation, and then we can apply training solutions which ATCOs will take part in with a digital instructor. So I think that's kind of very much on a productivity basis. If we take a step back and we look at what are we demanding from the manufacturers, and in our case, very much that's Thales, and I describe this as the Appleization of ATM. That's what we want. And in the same way that you have your Apple iPhone and you go to the App Store and pick whatever app you want, we're pushing them to open up the system, give us an open architecture system which will allow third-party suppliers to design apps, and we can choose then which apps best suit the type of service we're operating, because Coupons, where we operate with 6 other countries, is a fantastic operation, and we see the differences between those of us, such as Portugal and ourselves, with oceanic operations, and what we might versus the people in Croatia and Austria, for example, who are the core of Europe and have different expectations. So we think that would be very valuable. And again, I think that will give us cost efficiency benefits, so both for ourselves and for the airspace users. I think looking more towards the air, and Peter Bellew referred to this earlier, and we're certainly interested in more data to allow us to understand trajectory-based operations, particularly the downlink of the aircraft's trajectory, and that will give us the capacity to more accurately look after the continuous descent operations that he referred to. We're also looking ahead and thinking about single pilot operations. So what is the change to ATM that will be required in line with that? And the initial analysis we have is that we'll require to open up the ATM system to the airline op centers. So we'll have to feed more information, take more exchange of data there. So that's another area. Again, picking up on something Christine Berg mentioned earlier, and that's something we're working on again. It's how do we optimize the flight to reduce the climate impact? Very much this idea of the non-CO2 greenhouse gases. So to us, the solution is sucking in the data from the MET system and displaying that in the radar systems to allow that planning and that tactical maneuver as required. And then finally, as Ramon has said, very much the integration of unmanned vehicles into the system. To us, and from our perspective, actually, we're not so concerned whether they have people on board or not. It's just another target. So how do we put those into the system in a way that we exchange data safely with the UTM operators and generate capacity and efficiency across the network? So I say that they're the key points from our point of view.
So it sounds like we've got a huge menu of opportunities here that technology can bring, and which you mentioned also deliver benefits for the airspace users. It's not just about cost efficiency gains for the NSPs. Srečko, from a member state perspective, of course, you have a role to play in supporting this process of transformation. How do you see the opportunities and your role?
Thank you. Good afternoon to all the participants, and thank you for EASA organizing such interesting and great event. Higher level of automation and service-oriented architecture is in fact enabler for virtualization and dynamic management of airspace. On the other hand, it's also enabler to increase capacity of European airspace, which we see as a main problem back in 2019. Airspace has its own limitations, so capacity should be provided by increasing sector throughputs, which is not easy without new technology. In this stage, I would like to mention one of the interesting case study done by two air navigation service provider, which is ATM data as a service. Thank you.
Would you want to go into that a bit more? I know you've got a couple of slides. Do you want to explain a bit about what the objectives were when launching this project and what benefits it's expected to bring, and also if there were challenges that you had to overcome in implementing?
Yes, the overall objective of the ADAS project is the implementation of one of the first ATM data service provider, ADSPs, in Europe. The concept is based on three main pillars: service-oriented architecture, shared infrastructure and applications, and also very important part, standardized interfaces. The concept is a foundation for virtual center and capacity on-demand operation, which is also envisaged by the European airspace architecture study, with converging operational concept, which is furthermore enabler for the future European ATCO licenses, which was mentioned already a couple of times during the morning session. Maastricht, UASC, and Slovenia Control are cooperating now for more than 4 years on the deployment of the ADSP ATSU concept in 2025 plus, with the definition of the future flight data processing system architecture of Maastricht UASC FDPS as a primary and Slovenia Control FDPS as fallback system solution. First ADSP ATSU concept implementation is planned in 2027. This morning, the new cooperation agreement between those two INSPs were signed here in this building. But the main challenge, it's still open, that it's implementation and certification process of the future ADSP. Early involvement of the National Supervisory Authority and also EASA is very crucial at this or at such projects. Thank you.
Thank you. So you mentioned certification, and I'm going to come back to that a bit later because I think that's an important element of this whole discussion about accelerating the uptake of technology. But maybe before that, a question to anyone who wants to take it. What are the key enablers for this technological transformation, and are they in place already, or do we still have some way to go? Iacopo?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me start by the excellent points that Peter has made. They're all about improving the management of the trajectory, being artificial intelligence to the various iterations, being controllers and or statistics on the use of the trajectory, being the satellite-based capabilities, the downlinking of the information. All what we're doing is to improve the trajectory. How do we do that? We cannot anymore simply do it at a local level. Kupans is a great initiative, but the ambition needs to be deployed at a network level. So the enablers needs to be one that with a new architecture would allow the right flow of the data at the proper way. So today, We are well advanced in some of them. So the key enablers, for instance, the ground network, so the IP network is very well in place. For the data link, we are struggling with the legacy technology, and we need to put it in operations. And the network manager with all the operational stakeholders is working really hard to put it in operations because it's the first step to the air-ground integration. We are continuing, as I said before, we are promoting the work for the data link based on satellite, which is the next step. So some of the fundamental pillars, like the architecture, this digital journey, are starting to be in place. There's one fundamental component, which is I would call it the interoperability component. I would not call it IOP, which is something that we need hardly to work on. There's been a long journey. As EUROCONTROL, we think there's a lot more to do, and to create the right conditions to create the availability of the data, especially the safety of life operational data available to anyone who needs it at the appropriate time with the right, of course, level of certification. And that's something that we are still missing. That's something that we are working on a priority also within the ENDOP and the tech environment. But that, together with all what I was saying before, will truly create this, let's say, unique architecture for Europe ATM to dramatically evolve, and at the end of the day, manage the trajectory in 4D in real terms and in real effective way.
Mm. You just mentioned ENDOP, ND Tech. Maybe not everyone in the audience knows.
Yeah, I was saying it before. So the Director of Operations and the Director of Technology, yes, you're right, I apologize, are now structurally meeting together. And this is important because, again, the accountable people, so the people who are in charge of the operations and the people who are in charge of the CapEx programs are sitting together at European level, are also sitting together horizontally to integrate the value chain. And that's where the fundamental discussion on how to improve all this architectural element is happening, again, led by the industry and supported by EUROCONTROL.
Mm. Ramon, there was mention of the interoperability question, which I know has been a long story. How close are we to getting it in place?
Well, I think that this is out of question. We need systems to be interoperable. And with the new architectures, they gotta be there. What is the solution from a point of view of work that is being done in the R&D phase? This is a complete work. What we need to do is implement it. If there are opportunities to implement it in taking advantage of new architectures, of new ways of doing things. But I think that when people talk about interoperability, we talk about two things. Talk not only about technical, but also functional interoperability. So, and this brings me to the need for continue collaborating across the operational industry and the technology industry in terms of devising. I think that this morning there was this different colors thing in order to really we need a common platform of operations that is homogeneous, that this enables for changing and all the virtualization that we will go forward and all what is demanding the architectural study. So we got to be coherent. When you were referring to the master plan, you were referring to certain things. So I think that what we're needing is a little bit more focus on the deployment, on what is already been worked for many years. Mm. And the enabler, if I may add one enabler to the ones that Iacopo is putting, is one of the enablers will be these single digital sky demonstrators that we will also try to build a little bit the gap between what is being very well done and in a very collaborative manner during many years, and we need to have the investment. I agree with everybody this morning is asking faster pace. Mm. So faster pace, faster pace. Mm. This is what we need to do.
So obviously it's easy to say faster pace, and everyone wants a faster pace. That brings us to the question about acceleration. How do we actually accelerate? You've mentioned the demonstrators. I don't know, Peter, from your perspective, do you think the rollout of new technologies is going fast enough? Because I assume it takes time to adapt and so forth, but at the same time, we want to move forward as quickly as we can. So where do you get the balance there? And how are we accelerating sufficiently?
No, I think the answer is that we're not, and we clearly hear everybody saying that. We're very slow to bring new technology to market, shall we say. I think, David, we're extremely slow to look outwards at other industries, see what they have and suck it back in. Recently, I did some research with using Google Glasses, where we applied it to a single pilot of a 747 for his approach and landing. And we fed the approach checklist into the Google Glasses, and it worked very well. There's no reason why we can't apply that in a control tower and have them looking out the window and the information on the Google Glass. And that technology is a number of years old, so the capability is there. I think everybody agrees that we're on the cusp of a major leap, but I caution a little bit, and particularly when we talk about artificial intelligence, because I'm not sure that everybody understands what we're asking that. And are we saying that we want the technology to replace the human? Do we want the human to be in the loop, or do we want the human to be on the loop, where the artificial intelligence will make the decision and we'll tell you afterwards? So there's big discussions there, and that leads me to the point that if you don't put the controller at the center of the decision making with a full understanding, we will end up in terrible trouble. So we already understand from a cockpit perspective how there's opaqueness in the mode transition from one mode to another in different types of cockpit, or how audio alerts are the same from one alert to another, and that confuses people. So I think we need to be very careful here. On a more broader topic, I would say that something very dear to my heart and dear to all of my colleagues in coupons is this lack of certification of ATM systems. It's great to hear Peter Bellew talk, and we hear the Ryanair people talk all the time. And in Ireland, we're lucky we see them. They come across the ocean with an airplane from Seattle, and 2 days later, it's revenue generating on a route in Europe. We buy off a manufacturer. We have factory acceptance tests, we have site acceptance tests, and then we have huge burden of safety management processes to go through to deploy that into operation. And this takes time and money. And often we find that the questions from the regulator are more appropriate to the manufacturer. Can be very detailed and way beyond what our capability of answering is. So I think we would look for EASA to take a lead in that and build a regulation which would see certification, because I think it's quite hard to understand that it doesn't apply in ATM, yet everything in the cockpit is regulated. And then I think that perhaps the last point, David, is very much ANSPs at this point in time are in a very weak position. Most of us have lost a considerable amount of money as a result of the impact of COVID. Some of us are required to take on debt. So we're not in a very strong position for a lot of innovation. So I think that steers me to the SES program and realization that we need to make reasonable economic returns. We need to have reasonable depreciation timelines when we make innovation and we take on board new equipment. I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of the sophistication of the interaction between the KPIs, particularly between safety and cost efficiency, because they will pull against each other if we're not careful. And I think more generally the performance and charging scheme doesn't push ANSPs to make innovation, because it's demanding of you to say at a particular point in time you will introduce such a level of improvement, and it can be very difficult to forecast that. So I think that they're my basic points, David, in relation.
Thanks. So, Srečko, that makes me turn to you, because Peter's talking a bit about the framework, the regulatory framework. From a member state perspective, how do you see this? Do you share his view that there needs to be a stronger role for certification of ATM systems? And how do you see that from a member state perspective?
I agree with this. And as said, digital journey already started. New technologies are not yet available, but close to available. We heard that SESAR 3 will be launched end of the year, which is also a very important step. We do not need to forget, it was mentioned slightly also, human resources and cultural transformation, which is also needed in parallel with all this implementation of the new technologies. And as you said, institutional and regulatory framework should also follow these steps with adopted certification and oversight processes. So it's a lot of work has to be done. And as I mentioned already before, that's a big role of EASA and also national NSAs, and to be involved in all those happening from very beginning, not at the later stage. Thank you.
Thanks. And I mean, Ramon referred to the Digital Sky demonstrators, which is indeed going to be a key part of the SESAR 3 joint undertaking activities, and where the intention is to try and move further down or up the technological maturity pipeline, if you like, involve EASA more closely and earlier in the process, and the intention is that will also help accelerate. If I just change tack slightly, we've heard reference earlier today to the airspace architecture study, which back in 2019 was already talking about the importance of scalability and resilience in the ATM network. And I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has thrown those issues into even starker relief. What are the main technological innovations that can help us with scalability and resiliency? Iacopo?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the main point that was raised on the previous question, I would just like to highlight it again. It is about change management, and it is about the importance of making sure that we have an integrated approach in the value chain to be able to shorten time to operations. I say that because it's strongly connected to the airspace architecture study and the work that it's undergoing now. Because through COVID, the first 5 years of the airspace architecture study are to be implemented with the network manager through this executive cooperations that we're doing. And we are seeing that some of the fundamental enablers to ensure this scalability, of which I've talked a little bit before, but are essentially related to an advanced CNS capability, so improving data link on one side. On the other side is creating more integration between the different phases of the flight, from the pre-tactical, so the more flow management part, to the tactical part, are being now deployed with a single plan, coordinated together with all the major players, NSPs, airlines, and airports, and integrated between operations and technology. And that's the only way to succeed, because if we don't do that, we will still be bound, it was said also before, we'll still be bound by a long time to achieve certain goals, and we cannot afford it anymore. And if you see, for instance, the implementation that we foresee for the full data link operations, which will still take some time, and the next generation which is coming, it becomes absolutely essential that we work much more in a coordinated network environment, and again, with the industry deciding. This is also an asset towards EASA, because I think this is also something that the regulator looking transversally, and I think we have built an excellent cooperation. I think this will need to incrementally grow within EUROCONTROL, will become even easier to look at the different phases of the cycle, also for EASA, to work, as it was said before, from research and development to the implementation part. In the past, these periods were often not only very long, but often were disconnected among each other. So for me, the major enablers, again, are to improve the trajectory management. We said them before a lot. It's about data link, it's about downlinking on the information, it's about sector throughput, it's about dynamic sector, all which are in the plan. But one thing is to have a good plan, another thing is to implement the plan. And to implement the plan, I think the only way to be strongly successful and to anticipate is the journey that we have undertaken, which is to work very closely at network level to deploy those instantiations. This will also provoke the avoidance of a negative effect of duplicating different efforts at different places. The fundamental role of EASA has been said throughout the meeting of ensuring a standard approach where this also becomes a facilitator to the implementation of the work. So I think we have all the tools. The only thing is that we need to boost and be time-driven. This is something that we need. This needs to enter into our culture.
Thank you. I'd like your comment about it's one thing to have a plan, it's another thing to implement, because I think Europe is very good at having plans.
Yes, yes.
It's the next step, which sometimes it's not so strong at. Peter, from the NSP point of view and coupons, scalability and resilience, how do you see those questions?
Yeah, I think Iacopo sort of hit it at a very high level, and Ramon would be very good to talk to you about all of the sort of key technical data that's required. But I suppose in simple terms, it's artificial intelligence, smart data, speech recognition, I think would be very important. Definitely a new methodology for combining different elements of data for transmission through the network, I think can make us more efficient as well. The one area that we're very focused on is that we're pushing for productivity, we're pushing for improvements in airspace management, but we don't want to leave the ATCO behind in all of this. And I think we need to be very careful that we integrate pieces of technology in new controller working positions that also help the controller to manage the traffic. And what I'm talking about here is we're now working under regulations for fatigue risk management. We're required to build fatigue risk management manuals, manage fatigue, and we have done some research which has really used what's called heart rate variability and coherence training to give air traffic controllers the tools simply by regulating their breathing and their heart rate to reduce stress and manage fatigue. And that's something that can be inbuilt into a system which at very low cost. We've put it into British Airways as well, and they're operating that. I think another key element which would be useful will be building eye trackers into the controller work position and let us see where the controller's gaze is focused. That will allow a number of things. We'll see exactly where they're focusing on the screen, but will also give us the concept of using the dilation of the pupil to give us an insight into how much work they can manage. The bigger the dilation becomes, the more work they're on and the less they can take. So I think there are things like that we need to do. I think we need the manufacturers to be providing us with smart designs which are giving us alerting and alarm systems which are providing the controller with information, not just something that startles them and delays a response. So I think there are probably three key areas that will get left behind if we're not strong enough in talking to the manufacturers.
And are you getting those things from the manufacturers?
Yeah, we're working on those, and we foresee those within our next evolution of coupons. Okay.
And Ramon? Scalability and resilience?
I don't work in Thales with coupons, so I cannot. But in the other, in other alliances in Europe where there is cooperation between ITEC, where there is the major NSPs of Europe drive the requirements on how to set this common and the needs to have a better operation and what other integration. I would like to complement the point from Iacopo that the resilience is at the network level. You get it because you have nodes that are resilient. So it's very important that all this construction is working also at the node level and working node to node and network level, the cooperation, all the interoperability of cross borders, all these aspects of how to implement the technology. Really, we still have a little bit of work to do ahead of us. And also, I would like to use the intervention to say that the human is in the loop. This has been decided. We have, I would refer back to the architecture of the ATM system that we have referenced and we made this decision a few years ago. And we also made the decision that voice communications was going to be always there as a way to have a more safe program. But this doesn't mean that we don't have to implement CPDLC. Come on.
That's right.
CPDLC at this day and age, and we have it not in Europe. So I think that we need to work a lot in the program capabilities. Not necessarily this morning, it was also being mentioned that this is not a centralization of services that will make it work. It will also make it work if by pieces everybody does its job in each airspace, each NSP. I don't think it's just something that we can sort. I think that's more collective effort in terms of this.
And is that, I mean, what you've described there as being, we heard a lot of talk this morning about fragmentation, and what you've referred to there is a bit this balance between what we need on a centralized basis or network basis, what we need on a more local basis. We heard reference to Appleization, which implies somehow a more kind of distributed kind of approach, modular approach. Where is the balance, the right balance? Is it all of those things? And is that one of the reasons why, up until now, it's tended to be a rather slow process because there's so many different parts to manage? I don't know, Srečko, if you have a view. When you look at the progress of technology transformation in ATM, do you see it as slow? Do you think there's something that member states could do to help support a faster transformation?
In fact, that the implementation of technology is sometimes it's relatively slow. Should be faster, but I think that in last couple of years it's much better than 5-10 years ago. So it still needs to be improved, faster implementation, but therefore it's crucial that we work as regulatory part and industry together, that also institutional and regulatory framework will be in place for all those new technology like artificial intelligence and so on. So should be faster, but I don't know what's the obstacle. This morning I said that the system and technology should be mature enough to be operationally used, which is in fact true. Therefore, that if technology needs to be mature, that some time is needed. It's impossible to implement fast. So, thank you.
Thank you. I see we're already getting some questions in on Slido. I do encourage you, if you have questions, please feel free to submit your questions, hashtag ASC 2021 on Slido. What about the level of coordination we have in Europe to help support this technology transformation? Do we have the right processes? Do we need more coordination? If so, what type of coordination? Iacopo, do you have a view?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, one of the main efforts since I started 2.5 years ago was really to create the right level playing field at network level to be able to decide. So I think we have now in place a very robust methodology, enhanced, that will allow us to take the right decisions, operational and technological, interconnected in the value chain, and bringing all the partners together. Still, of course, there is, as any normal evolution, there is still some deviations to that. So my main comment on this is we need really to consolidate and concentrate our efforts where the right accountable decision making can happen to decide along this value chain effectively, together and timely. The second point that I think is still a bit missing to ensure connected also to the question before, the timely delivery, is the understanding that there's no more time to lose, and making sure that we understand that being time-driven is not an additional requirement. It's a fundamental element of us being successful in the future. And the only way to do that, especially if I look at the CNS part, is to have a more consolidated approach, which is happening. So we need to boost, and we need a regulatory framework, being EASA, being the European Commission, to support this rapid evolution of these common services that are, again, are led by the industry. We need, from what regards especially on the systems, to, as I said before, and I challenge a little bit my friend from INDRA here, we need to look at how we create this interoperability in the real sense, and to achieve it very quickly, because this will be a way to really boost the local or the virtual element into something which is common to the whole network, and it's not for a specific area or another area. And this also needs to be done very quickly. And I think when I said the digital transformation at the beginning, all the elements, the architecture, and the fundamental pillars are in the pipeline to be deployed to support that. So the last point on this is, for me, I think we are starting to have everything in place. I think there starts to be a common understanding. There's a true leadership, which I see, which it's very good in the executives, especially of the NSPs, to go ahead. We just need to strongly boost it. And again, coming to Peter's point, which I think is essential, I think it was one of the last points, is the engagement of the professionals and the ATCOs. This is something that is within all the lines of actions that we're doing in EUROCONTROL in the network manager with the partners, and this needs to be another pillar for the success. Also, in being brave enough, is starting to look at the licensing, starting to look at the sector capacity, starting to look in terms of sector throughput, starting to look at the training, because controllers are the same all over Europe, at least I would say. And this is something, a challenge we need to take to have a quick uptake of the improvements that we need.
So that takes me back to some of the comments we heard from Mr. Brennan in his opening keynote, referring to ACCO licensing and this. Ramon, do you have a view on that? This idea that there should be a basic common system that ACCOs can be licensed against?
I don't have a view on this. I am a technology provider. This is the business of the NSPs and how to organize the service. What is important is that in the design of the systems, the controllers, the ATCOs, they really are part of the design, they're part of the solution. They feel that this is gonna, I think that we've done it. I mean, in a practical terms, when you deploy a system in the field, not only by training, but even in the development phase, the ATCO's knowledge on how things work is not only the operational engineering, it's also the practical engineering. So the ATCOs should be part of all these developments, and they are, in fact, when these systems are designed. So in terms of, let me take the question back in terms of the certification of products, which is, I think, is the related question. Certification of products, for us on ground, it's always the comparison with the airborne side. These are two different business models, two different situations. If certification helps having interoperability, having a common system throughout Europe, if this is more economical for the deployment of the systems, we're up for it, any day. And actually, if this is what NSPs, what is the industry want, let's go for this kind of arrangement. Because again, I'm part of the supply chain here on the overall industry. This is, if this is the best way to organize, this is the best way.
So then the question is to NSPs. Is that what NSPs want?
Yeah, it is. Clearly it is. I'll answer that first, maybe. Absolutely it is. And I think we see the value of 6 countries coming together with exactly the same system in operation in all the air traffic control centres there. And it allows us to take the next jump forward, which will be the virtualization model. And we will put data in the cloud and allow any of the ANSPs pull data from the cloud and provide a service for each other. So that's really, in practice, what's going to happen for us on our next evolution. We're very excited by it. We're very excited by the fact that people in Dublin can work traffic in Vienna, etc., which leads me to the next part, which of course is about the ATCO licensing. And I'm very pleased to say that EASA have taken a big step forward and established an ATCO licensing work group, which is made up of representatives from ANSPs and regulators and the social partners and some of the training organisations. And its sole focus is to look at what can be done to improve the licensing system and program that's currently in place. And we do know that there are big variations in training and training programs throughout Europe. And the aim of that group is to understand that and produce concrete proposals as to how we can reduce those and become more efficient. So there are key tools I think that are going on. But certainly in terms of coupons, I mean, we sort of look at Single European Sky and we look at what we've done as a group of 6, and the power of the different cultures in that is really significant. Yet we get no benefit when it comes to SES or economic regulation. We're not viewed as a single body. I think that's a weakness in regulation. And we're looking beyond Europe now, and we're looking how do we integrate with the Australians on their Top Sky system, how do we integrate with people in Singapore on their system. So it's not just about looking at what's happening just here in Europe. We want to look beyond, and that's going to require the regulators in Europe and elsewhere to work together on proposals to manage that. So I think that's part of what we're doing.
Mm. Okay, thanks very much, Peter. I'm going to turn to a couple of the questions that have come in on Slido. There's one which may be a slightly provocative question, which is there any estimate about when the last air traffic controller will close their microphone and leave, I guess the implication is leave things to a more automated system. And do any of you see that day coming?
No, certainly not in the short to medium term. I don't see that as a possibility. I mean, there's so much work to be done. There are standards to be written to allow us to use these technologies. I think we need to understand artificial intelligence a lot more, because once the algorithm starts working, it's very difficult to understand where it's going to. So I think we have a lot of work to do there. And I think we'll need a whole series of regulations around this. So it's not short to medium term, I don't think, David.
Well, I think I would put it the other way around. I think the air traffic controllers and the ATSEPs as well are instrumental for this fundamental change that we are taking. So they of course, their job is going to evolve. It's going to enter into evolved logics by using the tools to support a better and safe environment. But having said that, they are instrumental to this change, and I agree with Peter, at least in the medium term, they are going to evolve, they're going to change, but they still will remain the fundamental asset for air traffic management.
Yeah.
I see no one disagreeing on my left. So another question has come in relation to data, saying that it looks like all the technological bricks are already available, but we have data from satellites, data from aircraft, the data link system, AI, machine learning will be generating data. Is it the integration of the data which is the weak link? And what's the way forward to have a seamless experience? Just add to that, there's the cybersecurity question, of course,
Yeah.
which I know we haven't touched on yet, but any thoughts on that? Maybe Ramon first?
Well, the integration of complex systems is actually a lot of, this is, we are in EASA, safety, at the end, you can put all the bricks together, but at the end of the day, you need to integrate this technology. But I don't think it's the problem, because we have the engineering and the procedures to put it all together. I'm a little bit more on the AI and machine learning. I mean, we would need to be a little bit more careful on what they mean by that. I don't think we have it now, and we don't even know exactly in what places to apply it. So this will take a little bit of more time, and I think it will be a more longer process, and just by using the architectures, all what we have, AI will come into certain domains, for example, in visual towers, remotes for recognition, in where it has business value. Machine learning could come for certain treatment of flight processing. So it's not the technology for the technology, is the business case, and I think we have the capabilities, technical capabilities, to have this integration of data. Maybe we have not talked about the transformation of the engineering side of ATM, which is also, now we need to attract these new data scientists and all these other engineering skills that we need to make attractive for the industry. And so in short, I don't think it's the weak link. I I think this is something that we has to do more with deployments and the way we organize and leadership and programs.
Well, if I may, I tend to sympathize. I have a slightly different view with what's said by Xavier. Yes, we have a lot of data available. Yes, there is already things which are developing quickly. Yes, we're still lagging behind with having, let's say, a common standards in terms of application to share the data. We're still a little bit lagging behind on how we use the data effectively, the famous one truth that I was saying before, the consistency to that. So I strongly believe that the effort of this digital transformation that needs to be done very quickly is the solution to create this architecture of and cloud-based architecture to allow, let's say, what we call in EUROCONTROL this data lake, where it's not application-based, but it's data-based, and then you source the information based on the level of eligibility that you have. That's the journey we need to do, but I sympathize with Xavier, and I also make a little publicity on artificial intelligence. In the network manager, we already have some applications. I know for some INSPs already have some applications, and on the 24th of November, if I'm not wrong, we're going to have an interesting artificial intelligence conference in EUROCONTROL to debate about that. So yes, there is some road to do on artificial intelligence, but it's a fundamental asset, and we're already starting to use it in the legacy systems today. And it's, of course, it's proving that very, very useful, especially when you need statistical information.
And Peter, what about the cybersecurity aspects of all of this? That must be an issue that's very close to the top of your agenda, I imagine.
It absolutely is, and I think the understanding of the scale of the threat on its own is a major thing to get our head around, and it brings a certain amount of conflict to us then when we consider that we close our system and in a way which we really just have to consider the insider threat. But as we move forward into SWIM networks, we're going to expose these systems in a much larger way, which we would concerned about. So for the moment, I think we have a certain level of control. We have a lot of testing. We have a lot of routine that we go through to make sure that we prevent somebody getting into the system. But I think the big challenge is once we open up, despite it being for the good of the network, what additional challenges does that present us, and how do we mitigate those? And I'm not sure the answer to that, David.
Yeah. May you allow me to compliment Peter, because Peter is touching on a fundamental point. At the moment you open the system, even if you're the best in class in your own NSP on cybersecurity, you become vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's where the effort that the NSPs especially are doing within launching this common service on the PKI, it's a start of having a common cybersecurity approach. And that's why I'm saying natively, digital transformation brings the fragmentation. And the only solution is not to consolidate into one, but is to have a common governance like we're doing in PANS, in AD, also on cybersecurity, where we address this as one of the fundamental elements. And I think very quickly you will hear that there will be this common action on cybersecurity functions at European level.
Mm-hmm. And Srečko, I mean, cybersecurity is an issue also, of course, for the politicians, the member states. Is this a topic that you're focusing on in Slovenia?
It is an issue. It's in regard to national level. For example, Slovenia, we need to. It's several different regulations, not necessarily tackling the aviation itself. Therefore, we need to establish a kind of coordination among different bodies and stakeholders nationally, and also EASA has already in pipeline its an opinion regarding the cybersecurity to be changed all the regulations. So it's still a lot needs to be done, also from a state point of view.
Yeah. And from a manufacturer's perspective, I mean, presumably you try to make sure your systems are cyber secure by design somehow.
I mean, cyber is, I think this morning was highlighted as a risk to the industry. So, and airlines, first ones to mention it. So, we apply all the standards for cybersecurity, we work on it, but I think that what we are talking here is another level of not fit by design. I don't think that you can sell fit by design against the kind of threats that we are talking. So I think that is an area that we really need to work on and take into account.
Okay, I just want to, by the way, last call for questions. Please, if you have a burning question you want to submit, put it on Slido. We still have time to take it. I just want to talk about drones and the integration of new entrants. Because there have been, some people, I've heard it said in conferences and so forth, that the introduction of drones and the establishment of use space is going to be what drives the modernization of air traffic management. And I was struck by your comment earlier, Ramon, where you said actually UTM will help the evolution inevitably into a more collaborative type of environment. What are your perspectives on this? How do you see the integration of new entrants, drones in particular, into the system? And is it going to be I guess we have to avoid it, but is there a risk there's a conflict between the need to manage drones and the need to manage traditional aircraft? Or how is that going to play out, do you think? Iacopo?
Well, yeah, in EUROCONTROL, we're following two threads. One is, of course, connected to what Peter was saying before about being a target and being in the common aviation environment. And that's where we have just launched, after the crisis, one of the main action lines within this Nectar Director of Operations group to have a common approach to manage the drones in an aviation environment. Because of course, this is another element that since it's starting now, it's a big opportunity to start with the right foot, to have a common standardized approach within all the INSPs, and also with the right foot from the regulatory point of view, where EASA is strongly engaged, where again, the commitment of EUROCONTROL is strong to support all the actions in that line. So that's one line of action. Then there's the other line of action, which I think is also very relevant, which regards the UTM and the infrastructure, where with our, let's say, research center in Bretigny, we are working very closely within the SESAR-GU framework, but even beyond the SESAR-GU framework, to end with, of course, our main partners, to start some real demonstrators. And the fact that it's also very close to Paris and we will have the Olympics, there's also some true corridors which are starting to be built. So going even beyond large-scale demonstration, entering into the logic of industrialization of certain UTM factors. And again, that goes back to my last point, which also here we need to integrate the value chain. Not R&D for the sake of R&D, a process where you make the research necessary, you define and you implement, and EASA present at each step to support with all the regulatory needs. Again, to shorten time to operation. But we're very much engaged, not going to go away, and it's going to boost in the next years.
And Peter, I know you touched on drones earlier as well, but
Yeah.
do you see, is there any sense in which the integration of drones is going to be the demand which drives the inevitable kind of technology transformation of ATM?
I don't see that clearly. I think from the ANSP perspective, what we have is a little bit of doubt as to how do we actually manage drones within the system. We certainly see the point that Iacopo has outlined and the need for that and the value in that. I think where the difficulty comes is the expenditure that we will have to pay to integrate them. And how do you under economic regulation, how do you achieve a return on the investment? And that's what seems to be missing for the moment. So it's much more an economic business sort of perspective for us at the moment. To be honest, from a safety point of view, the more we can integrate them and the more we can have a standardized system in which they're operating, I think it's better for the aviation system. So we would fully support that.
Yeah. As an economist, I think the question about how you fund it is a very interesting one, but I think that's beyond the scope of this discussion. We have got a question that's coming on Slido. Digitalization means software service delegation, so a complexification of the software stack. How to conciliate that with the safety requirements? I don't know if any of you feel capable of answering that question. Ramon, you're almost.
I almost, but I think this is a very technical question because it goes into conformity assessment of ED 109. And at full phase, this would mean a complication. But I think that this is also related on how you want to certify and how if we move into other areas. So I'm just saying I don't feel really comfortable in answering this precise conformity.
For me, it's very straightforward. It has to be conciliated, and the work that you do in terms of safety requirements throughout the steps needs to be done. And I believe, again, there's no way back. We have to do it. Otherwise, this can be an excuse to go back to the old story where you do separated individual software developments, which have been one of the slow elements of this industry that we need to get away from. So I think the answer is clear from my point of view. And I also think that it is the effort that we need to do. Like any other industry, we think that they were totally different. There's other industries which are safety of life very important, from the medical industry to the rocket industry. They are all working in this direction, and we need to go in that direction. And I think the answer for me is very simple there.
Okay, thank you. So we're coming towards the end of our panel session. There's one question that's come up on slide. I'm going to combine it with another question and use it as a kind of wrap-up question. So the question that's come in is, what will be the big and urgent challenge for ANSPs in the short term to implement this new challenge of transformation? And I want to add to it another question, given this is an EASA safety conference, is what would be your message to EASA about what EASA could or should do, either that it's not doing or that it should do better?
Take it first, Peter.
So Srečko, I'll start with you.
I know, he decided.
Yeah, EASA should continue with the defined plans. It's also for EASA challenging to produce and changing quite a lot of regulation. We discussed also about the new entrants. So partly the regulation framework is in place, but still a lot has to be done. So just continue in cooperation with the member states to follow the new technologies as fast as possible.
Great, thank you. Peter? And maybe especially that question about the urgent challenge.
Yeah, thank you, David. I suppose, you know, at a sort of a macro level where I'm sitting, the big challenge for the moment is maintaining the financial viability of the ANSP in tandem with increasing and enhancing safety. Like, that's really the big challenge. And internally in our organisation, that's what the clear focus is on. So there's a lot of work going on in that. So it's very important to us that we finish the RP3 process, that we get a route turn, and that we can move on. That's clear for us. I suppose in terms of the question to the question in terms of EASA, I suppose number one for us is certification of the ATM systems. That's number one. We want to be like anybody else that buys an airplane. We want to take it and plug it in and work it. It's quite simple in my controller's head. I think consistency of regulation is another area that we're very interested in, because we get oversight across 6 countries. And we look to the basic regulation and the provisions within that, and we don't see those reflected in Regulation 373 or in 469. So we'd like the opportunity to enhance how we conduct our regulation and our safety management processes as a group of 6. Rather than having to go to 6 individual regulators, there must be a better way to work that. So I think EASA are well up for that. And then I think finally then, it's something around maybe the smoothing of regulation as we look forward to move into Regulation 469. Our analysis shows us 1,500 additional compliance requirements. So it's a lot of extra burden. I don't argue at all about the necessity of it, but it's just an understanding that is an extra burden for compliance and monitoring and execution that we need to do. So that's a cost. So we just need to manage that. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Ramon?
Well, I think it's obvious from the organization today and the initial statement from Tarrech this morning on what is the role of EASA in ATM, that EASA is very welcome. It's very expected to help, but I would raise some concern, which is in the FAA, activities having to do with certification and with is public funded by budgets, and so if we give we want EASA to do a certain job, the business model that is done in the manufacturing side of airborne does not apply to how the things are structured and regulated in the ground side systems. So if we want EASA to do a job, we need to fund it. And we need to work closely together that all this is understood. And in the role of safety, we need to be consistent on how all this is structured and regulated in Europe.
Thanks, Ramon. And Iacopo.
Well, I think the biggest energy challenge, again, it's this leadership transformation. I think that there is a strong leadership in the NSPs now. I would say in the overall environment, airports, airlines, there's better understanding of the needs. So this needs to be boosted. And this comes into the factually implementing especially the first steps of this digital transformation. So in these common services that we're doing, going to the data link, and so the CNS part, and of course, looking at this interoperability quickly to ensure that the data exchange for safety of live information in air traffic control is shared among the network between the various also big group of NFSPs that already did a big jump. This also is interconnected to your second point, which is the EASA role. Because I think this moves the responsibility of the EASA more forward. I think Patrick this morning was mentioning the fact of certifying EGNOS, of certifying the network manager, of certifying Aerion. And the more we go towards data link, satellite-based data link, cybersecurity part, the other common services, then the wider role of certification needs to be there, because this will bring together all the certification in a more uniform way, avoiding the point that Peter was saying also, that this creates also a less smooth regulatory environment, which create additional work, additional complexities, additional time. And my last point is, again, towards EASA, to consider the EUROCONTROL and the network manager fully in support of all the work that you will need to do to standardize this architecture, to work on the systems, and also to look at how all the next steps of having a more, let's say, common regulation over Europe can be supported from the technical point of view towards EASA, and this you have the full support of EUROCONTROL in doing that.
Thank you, Iacopo. So I think it's been a really stimulating discussion. I hope you found it interesting and it's satisfied your appetite for discussions about the technology transformation. I won't summarize the whole discussion, but a few key words popped up. One was time-driven. I like the word Appleization. We obviously heard something about certification. But I think it's clear from the discussion that there's a strong consensus that technology has a lot to deliver and that we need to work collaboratively together and in a coordinated way to accelerate the implementation of new technologies in ATM. So with that, I'd just like to finally thank very much the panelists, Srečko, Ramon, Peter and Iacopo. You did a great job. And with that, it's back to Janet.
So, thank you, David. In a change to our programme, we're actually going to go straight on now to the wrap-up session, so don't run away and make cups of tea just now, because there'll be time for that in a few moments. Thank you very much, so also to David and all of the panellists for that last session. That was very useful. It'll take us a couple of moments just to transition, and we'll be back with you then. Thank you.